Have you ever noticed how exhausting it feels to constantly chase after what you want in life? How many prayers have you offered, only to feel like they're bouncing off the ceiling and returning to you unanswered? What if I told you that everything you've been taught about prayer, manifestation, and spiritual connection has been fundamentally backward? Has this ever happened to you? You pray fervently for healing, abundance, or love, only to find yourself feeling more separated from these things than before. The truth is startling in its simplicity. Most people spend their entire lives begging for things they already possess. Think about that for a moment. While you're petitioning the universe with clenched fists and anxious hearts, infinite abundance is already pouring into your life. The problem isn't God's unwillingness to give, it's your inability to receive. But before we begin, please hit the like button and let me know where in the world you're watching from today. It's always fascinating seeing who's joining us from around the world. And if you haven't already, make sure to hit that subscribe button and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any of our future videos. This radical shift in understanding changes everything. When you stop seeing yourself as separate from divine grace and start recognizing your oneness with it, the entire foundation of your spiritual practice transforms. Stay with me until the end of this video, because what you're about to discover might completely revolutionize your relationship with the divine and unlock doors you've been pushing against for years. Consider the energetic difference between asking and receiving. When you ask, you're vibrating at the frequency of lack, desperation, and separation. Every prayer request actually affirms what you don't have. Please heal me reinforces that you're sick. Please bring me abundance declares your poverty. This vibration creates an energetic wall between you and what you desire. But receiving, that's an entirely different energy. Receiving carries the vibration of fullness, gratitude, and union with your source. It acknowledges that what God has, you have. What God is, you are. This isn't spiritual arrogance. It's the fundamental truth that mystics across traditions have been pointing to for centuries. What would happen if you approached each day not as a beggar at heaven's gate, but as a child in your Father's house, simply acknowledging and receiving what's already yours? How would your prayers change if they became moments of recognition rather than desperation? The ancient secret that transforms spiritual beggars into divine receivers isn't complicated, but it does require a complete reversal of everything you've been taught about how the universe works. And in the next few minutes, I'll share exactly how this consciousness shift unfolds and what truly happens when you stop seeking and start surrendering. If these teachings on receptivity and surrender have touched something deep within you, subscribe to join our community of spiritual seekers. Together, we'll continue exploring the profound wisdom that can transform your relationship with the divine and with yourself. Imagine for a moment what your spiritual journey would look like if you replaced your prayer list with a simple declaration: I am now open to receive all that God is giving me. This profound shift in mindset is the hidden truth behind every authentic transformation. Instead of approaching the divine with demands, you become an open channel, allowing divine substance to flow naturally into every dimension of your existence. This practice of receptive awareness is deceptively simple, yet it represents a complete paradigm shift in how we relate to the universe. Think of how a flower doesn't strain to absorb sunlight, it simply turns its face toward the sun and receives what's freely given. Your spiritual nature works the same way. When you stop struggling and start allowing, you align with the natural rhythm of divine flow. The beauty of this approach lies in its effortlessness. Most of us have been conditioned to believe that spiritual growth requires immense struggle, constant vigilance, and perpetual striving. But Joel Goldsmith's revolutionary insight turns this assumption on its head. What he called resting in God is more like spiritual breathing than spiritual climbing. You're not making anything happen through force of will. You're simply allowing what already is. The impact of this shift becomes particularly visible in your financial reality. When you stop the desperate energy of financial striving and begin practicing receptivity instead, a remarkable journey unfolds. First comes an internal shift, a loosening of the knot of anxiety that's been lodged in your chest. A strange peace replaces panic, even when external circumstances haven't yet changed. I've witnessed countless individuals experience this revelation firsthand. Take Maria, who had spent 3 years in aggressive prayer for financial breakthrough while her debt mounted and anxiety intensified. When she finally surrendered the asking approach and embraced receptivity, the transformation didn't happen overnight. The first 2 weeks felt empty and frightening, as if nothing was happening. But beneath the surface, the mindset shift was already working its magic. By the 3rd week, unexpected opportunities began appearing. A freelance project here, a forgotten refund there, a debt surprisingly forgiven. 6 months later, her financial landscape had completely transformed. The most profound change, however, wasn't in her bank account, but in her relationship with abundance itself. She no longer approached prosperity as something external to chase, but as her natural inheritance to receive. This reveals the fundamental truth about manifestation that so many miss. The outer world follows the inner world. Your relationship with prosperity begins not with clever strategies or desperate prayers, but with your ability to receive what's already yours. When you shift from poverty consciousness to abundance consciousness, you're not creating something new. You're simply removing the barriers to what has always been flowing toward you. Now, I want to go even deeper into this topic by exploring what happens when this receptive awareness extends beyond finances into your physical well-being. The same principle that transforms your bank account can revolutionize your experience of health and vitality. If something in this message has resonated with your own experience, put "I'm ready to receive" in the comments below. This revelation about receptivity becomes even more profound when applied to physical healing. Consider this: what if healing isn't something that needs to be sent to you from an outside source, but rather something already present in your true spiritual nature? This perspective creates a revolutionary breakthrough in how we approach well-being. David's journey illustrates this principle beautifully. After being diagnosed with a chronic condition, he spent 5 years in desperate healing prayers, attending every prayer meeting, anointing himself with oil, and declaring healing scriptures. Yet his body remained sick, and his asking had become almost hostile, frustrated that God wasn't responding to his faithful petitions. The awakening came when he discovered that his very approach was creating resistance. What if healing wasn't something God needed to send, but something already present in his spiritual DNA? What if his asking was actually the obstacle preventing him from experiencing the wholeness that was already his? With this revelation, David began practicing receptive awareness for his health. Instead of begging for healing, he would sit quietly and affirm, "I am open to receive the perfect health that is my divine inheritance." He stopped fighting his symptoms and started resting in divine presence. This wasn't denial of his condition, it was recognition of a deeper spiritual reality beneath physical appearances. The transformation didn't happen overnight. Some days were harder than others, but gradually fear released its grip. Symptoms began subtly shifting. Within a year, medical tests confirmed what David already sensed: significant improvement. His doctor called it spontaneous remission, but David understood it as learning to receive what God had never withheld. This same principle of receptivity creates powerful alignment in your relationships. When challenges arise with partners, family members, or friends, our instinct is to demand they change. We ask them to behave differently, to meet our needs, to complete what feels missing in us. But this asking energy creates the very separation we're trying to heal. Through receptive consciousness, a profound shift occurs. You stop asking others to complete you and start receiving the love that you already are. This creates space for authentic connection because you're no longer operating from emotional neediness, but from a place of fullness. There's a beautiful paradox here. When you no longer need others to fill your emptiness, you become truly available for genuine intimacy. Jennifer's relationship transformation illustrates this truth. After years of demanding her husband change to meet her emotional needs, she discovered receptive consciousness. Rather than asking him to be more attentive, communicative, or romantic, she began receiving the love already present in herself, in him, in their connection. As she stopped demanding and started receiving, something remarkable happened. Her husband began responding differently, not because she had manipulated him into changing, but because the energetic dynamic between them had fundamentally shifted. The journey toward receptive relationships reveals perhaps the most intimate truth of all, that the love you've been seeking has always been inside you. If you've experienced this shift from demanding to receiving in your own relationships, share "I'm learning to receive love" in the comments below. This receptivity principle creates a remarkable shift in your professional life as well. Think about how most people approach their careers, constantly striving, pushing, and manipulating circumstances to create success. There's an underlying belief that if you don't force opportunities to happen, they simply won't materialize. But this mindset creates the very resistance that blocks authentic fulfillment. Michael's journey reveals the hidden truth behind career transformation. After 15 years of aggressive networking, strategic positioning, and relentless self-promotion, he found himself in a prestigious position that left him feeling empty and disconnected from his true purpose. The revelation came during a period of burnout when he simply couldn't maintain the pushing energy anymore. In that space of surrender, something unexpected happened. He began receiving clear, intuitive guidance about his authentic path. As Michael shifted from striving to receiving, his professional life reorganized around his genuine gifts rather than his ego's agenda. Opportunities started appearing that aligned perfectly with his natural talents, often without his deliberate seeking. His work became less about achieving external markers of success and more about expressing divine intelligence through his unique capabilities. The profound paradox he discovered was that true fulfillment came not from climbing higher, but from allowing himself to be carried by a current already moving in his favor. This journey into receptive consciousness doesn't happen overnight. Understanding the timeline of transformation helps you navigate the process with greater compassion for yourself. The path from asking to receiving unfolds gradually over weeks and months, with distinct phases that almost everyone experiences. The first phase often feels empty or even frightening. As your ego resists surrendering control, you may wonder if anything is happening at all. This initial period tests your commitment. Are you willing to continue when there's no immediate external validation? The middle phase brings intermittent glimpses of peace amidst ongoing struggles. You catch moments of receptivity before slipping back into familiar asking patterns. These fluctuations aren't failures, but natural steps in rewiring neural pathways that have been reinforced for decades. Eventually, with consistent practice, receiving becomes your default state. You'll still occasionally slip into asking mode, especially during significant challenges, but you'll notice it quickly and gently return to receptivity. Each day of practice moves you closer to what Joel Goldsmith called the illumined life, where receptive awareness isn't something you do, but something you are. The most liberating aspect of this journey is that you're not trying to achieve some distant future state. You're simply removing the barriers to what has always been your natural condition. Behind all the striving, beneath all the asking, your receptive consciousness has been patiently waiting for you to remember its presence. If you're beginning to recognize moments of this effortless receiving in your own experience, share "I'm embracing divine flow" in the comments below. One of the most powerful gateways into this receptive consciousness is silent meditation. Many people approach meditation as another form of spiritual achievement, something to get good at, another milestone to reach. But in the context of receptivity, meditation takes on an entirely different meaning. It becomes the sacred space where you experience yourself not as a separate entity begging for connection, but as the very environment where divine presence naturally dwells. This subtle distinction creates a revolution in your practice. Rather than striving for special states or mystical experiences, you're simply recognizing what's eternally present. The silence between your thoughts isn't empty, it's pregnant with the very presence you've been seeking. As you rest in this awareness day after day, something remarkable happens behind the scenes of your consciousness. The artificial boundary between your everyday self and your spiritual self begins to dissolve. Sarah discovered this revelation after years of goal-oriented meditation. She had been diligently working toward enlightenment experiences, collecting spiritual insights like trophies. The breakthrough came when her teacher suggested a radical shift to stop seeking and simply be the space where divine awareness already exists. This subtle mindset pivot transformed her practice from achievement to recognition, from seeking to finding. Through consistent meditation in this receptive mode, the gap between her daily awareness and her receptive consciousness gradually closed, until there was no longer any separation between the sacred and the ordinary. Ready to deepen your practice of receiving consciousness? Subscribe now to access more transformative teachings that will help you move from spiritual seeking to divine surrender. Every video is designed to gently guide you toward recognizing the abundance that's already yours. Of course, this journey into receptivity isn't always smooth sailing. One of the most valuable insights you can embrace is that resistance, doubt, and old asking patterns will inevitably resurface, especially during challenging times. These moments aren't failures in your spiritual development, but opportunities to deepen your practice in precisely the ways you most need. When doubt appears, whispering that nothing is happening or that this approach isn't working, the habitual response is to fight against it, to push it away as evidence of spiritual weakness. But the receptive path offers a profound alternative. Receive even your resistance as part of your growth. This counterintuitive move disarms the very energy that would otherwise derail your progress. James encountered this revelation during a financial crisis that triggered all his old scarcity patterns. After months of practicing receptivity, he suddenly found himself back in desperate asking mode, frantically trying to force solutions. The breakthrough came not from doubling down on his practice, but from receiving even his panic as part of his journey. When he could embrace his temporary regression with compassion rather than judgment, he discovered a deeper level of receptivity that included even his resistance. This revelation, that gradual progress, not perfection, is the nature of spiritual transformation, creates a sustainable foundation for your development. Each time you notice yourself slipping into asking mode and gently return to receptivity, you're actually strengthening your new consciousness in ways that forced consistency never could. If you've experienced these waves of progress and regression in your own practice, share "I embrace the whole journey" in the comments below. A common misconception about receptivity is that it leads to passivity, that somehow you'll be sitting around waiting for life to happen to you. Nothing could be further from the truth. Living from receiving consciousness doesn't diminish your action in the world. It transforms the very nature of that action. There's a profound difference between desperate action and inspired action that changes everything about your effectiveness. Desperate action emerges from asking consciousness. It's driven by external pressure, fueled by anxiety, and characterized by struggle. You're pushing against resistance, trying to make things happen through sheer force of will. This approach is not only exhausting, but often counterproductive, creating the very obstacles you're trying to overcome. It's like swimming upstream, expending enormous energy while making minimal progress. Inspired action, by contrast, flows naturally from receptive consciousness. As you open yourself to divine guidance, you begin moving with the current of life rather than against it. There's an effortlessness, an alignment, a sense of being carried by something larger than yourself. You're still taking action, often more significant action than before, but without the internal resistance that creates suffering. Rachel's breakthrough in her creative work illustrates this distinction beautifully. For years, she approached her writing with desperate determination, forcing herself to produce through discipline and willpower. The results were adequate, but lacked the spark of genuine inspiration. When she discovered receptive consciousness, she began approaching her craft differently, starting each session by opening herself to receive whatever wanted to emerge through her. The shift was remarkable. Not only did her productivity increase, but the quality of her work reached levels she'd never imagined possible. She was taking more action than ever, but it felt like she was being written through, rather than writing by her own limited resources. The impact of this receptive consciousness extends far beyond your personal experience. As your practice stabilizes, something remarkable begins happening around you. People in your orbit start experiencing shifts without you directly trying to influence them. This ripple effect happens naturally, without preaching or proselytizing. Your presence itself becomes a catalyst for transformation in your community. Think of it as creating a field of possibility. When you're consistently operating from receptive awareness, you hold space for others to access that same consciousness. You're not trying to change anyone. You're simply receiving truth so clearly that it naturally dissolves false appearances in the consciousness of those around you. Your receptivity becomes a healing presence without your having to do anything about it. Mark noticed this phenomenon in his workplace. After months of practicing receptivity, colleagues began coming to him with problems that mysteriously resolved in his presence. Family members reported feeling peaceful around him without understanding why. This wasn't because he had developed special powers, but because his receptive consciousness created an environment where others could more easily access their own connection to Source. The most profound impact often occurs when you're not trying to have any impact at all. If you've noticed this ripple effect happening in your own sphere of influence, share "I'm creating ripples of transformation" in the comments section below. Perhaps the most profound transformation occurs in your relationship with the divine itself. When you shift into receiving consciousness, prayer becomes something entirely different from what you've known before. It's no longer a negotiation or petition, a transaction where you're trying to convince God to give you something. Instead, prayer becomes awareness, recognition, and acknowledgement of what already is. This revelation completely reconstructs the foundation of your spiritual practice. Think about the hidden assumptions behind traditional prayer. There's an implicit belief that God is separate from you, a cosmic parent you must approach with requests, hoping they'll be granted if you're worthy enough. This transactional model creates a fundamental disconnect that blocks genuine communion. The breakthrough comes when you recognize that God isn't an external being you communicate with, but the infinite presence you dwell within, the divine consciousness you share, the eternal source you recognize as your own being. Thomas experienced this profound revelation after decades of dutiful religious practice. His prayers had always followed the same pattern: acknowledging God's greatness, confessing unworthiness, presenting requests, and hoping for favorable responses. The transformation began when he encountered Joel Goldsmith's teaching on receptive prayer. At first, it seemed almost blasphemous to suggest that God wasn't separate from him. But as he experimented with this approach, something remarkable happened. His prayer time shifted from talking at God to resting in God's presence, from transaction to communion. This shift doesn't make you arrogant, as some might fear. In fact, it creates a completely different kind of humility, not the false humility of unworthiness, but the authentic humility of recognizing that what's true of the divine is true of everyone, not just you. You're not special because God gives you things. You're ordinary because what God is, everyone is. The only difference is consciousness. Some know they're receiving while others are still trapped in asking. This transformation in your relationship with the divine creates profound changes in your physical and emotional well-being. Your body actually responds differently when you live in receiving consciousness. Stress hormones decrease because you're no longer constantly in the asking energy of pursuit and lack. Your nervous system relaxes into trust and abundance. Many physical symptoms rooted in separation and fear begin dissolving naturally as you rest in oneness with divine source. Lisa's journey illustrates this mind-body connection beautifully. For years, she suffered from chronic anxiety that manifested in digestive issues and sleep disturbances. Traditional medical approaches provided temporary relief but never addressed the root cause. The revelation came when she realized that her constant state of anxious striving, always pushing for more, better, different, was creating the very physical symptoms she was trying to heal. As she practiced receiving consciousness, something remarkable happened. Without directly focusing on her symptoms, she noticed they began to diminish. Her sleep improved, her digestion stabilized, and the knot of anxiety in her chest loosened. This wasn't because receiving consciousness magically cured her condition, but because it addressed the underlying pattern that was creating it. Emotional resilience grows naturally as you stop fighting reality and start receiving each moment's wisdom. If you've experienced physical or emotional shifts through this practice of surrender, share "My well-being is transforming" in the comments below. One of the most beautiful revelations that emerges from receiving consciousness is how naturally generous you become. This isn't generosity born from obligation or moral duty. It flows effortlessly from your recognition of abundance. When you know you're living in infinite divine supply, sharing becomes as natural as breathing. You're not giving from a place of sacrifice or depletion, but simply allowing the flow to move through you to others. This represents a revolutionary shift in how we understand generosity. Most giving comes from a mindset of scarcity. There's only so much to go around, so sharing means you'll have less. But in receiving consciousness, generosity isn't depleting. It's actually recognizing the endless nature of supply. The more you allow to flow through you, the more you experience coming to you. It's like a river that remains full no matter how much water passes through it. Robert discovered this paradox after years of calculated giving. He had always been philanthropic, carefully budgeting his charitable contributions while maintaining a strong sense of ownership over his resources. The breakthrough came when he began practicing receptivity and recognized that he wasn't the source of his abundance, but simply a channel for it. As this awareness deepened, his relationship with giving transformed completely. He no longer tracked or limited his generosity because he understood that the flow was endless. The remarkable discovery was that the more freely he gave, the more abundance seemed to appear in his life, creating a virtuous cycle that expanded into all areas. This natural generosity becomes a litmus test for your receiving consciousness. When you find yourself hesitating to share or calculating what you can afford to give, it's a clear sign that you've slipped back into scarcity thinking. But when giving flows joyfully without second guessing, you know you're operating from the truth of infinite supply. Your generosity becomes not something you do, but something you are, a natural expression of your recognition of abundance. Now we arrive at the ultimate revelation that ties everything together. You are not separate from God trying to receive gifts from an external source. You are the very consciousness of God receiving awareness of your own infinite nature. This isn't spiritual theory. It's the fundamental truth that Joel Goldsmith discovered after decades of mystical practice, and that mystics across traditions have been pointing toward for centuries. When you practice receiving, you're not actually getting something new. You're removing the veil that blocked your recognition of what has always been yours. This explains why asking never worked in the first place. You were essentially asking yourself to give yourself what you already had all along. It would be like a fish praying for water while swimming in the ocean, or the sun begging for light while radiating brilliance. This revelation doesn't make you special. It makes you ordinary in the most extraordinary way. What's true of you is true of everyone, whether they recognize it or not. The only difference is consciousness. Some people know they're already receiving, others are still trapped in asking. If this profound understanding is beginning to resonate with something deep within you, share "I am what I've been seeking" in the comments below. This journey of moving from seeking to surrendering is ongoing, a daily practice of remembering what's already true. As you integrate this receptive consciousness into your life, you'll experience moments of profound connection, alternating with times when the old patterns resurface. Be gentle with yourself through this process. The very act of noticing when you've slipped into asking mode is itself a victory, a sign that your awareness is expanding. If this message resonated with something deep within you today, I'd be honored if you'd leave a like on this video. Your engagement helps these teachings reach others who might be ready for this same transformation. And if you're feeling called to continue exploring these principles with me, subscribe to join our community of spiritual seekers who are practicing receptivity together. I'd love to know you made it to the end of our journey today. Drop "I choose to receive" in the comments if these teachings have touched something within you. Your reflections and experiences inspire me and help our entire community grow. There's a natural unfolding to this spiritual journey, and I've created a video right here that explores how to maintain this receptive consciousness during life's inevitable challenges. Click and join me there as we continue unwrapping the profound wisdom that Joel Goldsmith left for us, wisdom that has the power to transform not just our spiritual practice, but every dimension of our lived experience.